Last but not least, in terms of my interest in poetry, there's a very old poet who was born in 1763 named Samuel Rogers. And since we spend a lot of time on history here and we share memories, he wrote a poem which was called The Pleasures of Memory. And if you haven't read it, it's really a terrific poem that very aptly describes what happens when you start imagining things and you start remembering things. One image brings up another image, and your senses get involved, and so forth and so on. It really is an explanation of why people like poetry. And I recommend it. Poems of Sentiment from The Pleasures of Poetry, Samuel Rogers. And I have a copy that I will not read because I want to leave enough time for BJ. BJ's husband, Wendy, and I go back over 30 years, old friends from the golf course. And Donald, who had to leave, goes back further than that, was an old neighbor and friend with Wendy and his mother. I've known BJ for probably about 30 years, from when Wendy was playing at the reservation, showing me, beating me in the finals, I should say. Anyway, we're all old friends, and I also wanted you to know that, among other things, BJ is a retired administrator in the state government for over 30 years. She's been very active in poetry, but she's also a very serious researcher in family studies and genealogy, and done some good work in those areas. And she has headed up a poetry group in Mattapoisett for 6 years or so, and has very thoroughly enjoyed her retirement. She goes by the name of BJ, and people who know her really well call her Beej, but her name is Betty Jean, and she's from Washington State, and has been here in the East for a long time. But she probably still likes Spokane out there in the West. Without further ado, I'm going to turn the podium over to BJ, and she's going to talk with us about poetry.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's my pleasure to talk with you all tonight. I have a ton of material. I promise I won't go long. And you can give me the big nod, the big hook if I get too carried away, because I can get carried away when I talk about something that I love so much. I'm not from around here, and I'm very proud of that. I try really hard not to adopt the New England accent, but I found that as a way to preserve myself, sometimes I slip into that. But I grew up in eastern rural Washington State in the Spokane Valley. And I attended 3 high schools in 3 years. And the reason for that was my sophomore year, I had been a member of the Central Valley High School in Central Valley. Then my dad in 1964 was transferred to Central Massachusetts. So what we did was move cross-country with 2 vehicles and a trailer, camping along the way, believe it or not, and landed in North Brookfield, which is a very rural town near Sturbridge, Worcester, but rural. And I was a member of a junior-senior high, very small class, so there I was, the new kid. And then the following year, the company was transferred to Belmont, Mass, and so we moved to Newtonville. And I went to Newton High and had a class of 900 people. And so I was in the big city. I lived right off the Mass Pike, and I could walk to school and have an Italian sub on the way home, and it was a great way to grow up. But what was really impressive to me was I don't remember anything about English or poetry or any of that stuff besides nursery rhymes until I got into Miss G's advanced English class. Her name was Miss Gianferrante, and she just loved poetry, and she turned me on to Carl Sandburg. You might remember this. Fog. The fog comes on little cat feet. It sits looking over harbor and city on silent haunches and then moves on. So I said, wow, who's this guy? I did what I've always done all my life, and that is I went to the library, to the Newton Public Library, and I was able to get a recording, long play, 33 1/3, of Carl Sandburg reading his poetry. And I did this for a project for my senior class that year. It's called Jazz Fantasia. Drum on your drums, batter on your banjos, sob on the long, cool, winding saxophones. Go to it, oh jazzmen. Sling your knuckles on the bottoms of the happy tin pans, let your trombones ooze and go husha, husha, hush with the slippery sandpaper. Moan like an autumn wind high in the lonesome treetops. Moan soft like you wanted somebody terrible. Cry like a race car, slipping away from a motorcycle cop. Bang, bang, you jazzmen. Bang all together, drums, traps, banjos, horns, tin cans. Make two people fight on the top of a stairway and scratch each other's eyes in a clinch tumbling down the stairs. Can the rough stuff. Now a Mississippi steamboat pushes up the night river with a hoo, 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 and the green lanterns calling to the high, soft stars. A red moon rides on the humps of the low river hills. Go to it, oh jazzmen. Now there I was, this very naive high school senior. And what happened was I went away to school, graduated from college, got into my career, got married, got divorced, moved south to New Bedford in 1976. And so I really kind of forgot about poetry for about 30 years or so. And then I met Wendell. We were social workers together. And he and I were married the same year that my mother died of cancer in 1982. I lost a brother to cancer in 1996 in Montana. And all the while this was going on, I was working in state government in middle management. Then came retirement, and I had time on my hands to do what I wanted. And I saw a column in the Standard Times by Marcia McCabe, who was a columnist at that time for the Standard Times. And she was talking about a class called Writing from the Heart that she was taking and actually facilitating with Peter Crysdale. And it sounded very good to me. And what sounded really enticing was the fact that she was a professional writer, and she was terrified of having to write on demand and then read her work without the ability of editing it, which I thought was pretty amazing. So I said, this would be fun, you know. This man, Peter Crysdale, was from British Columbia, so he and I had a connection geographically in terms of being Western, and so I took that class. I've taken it just about every year since. Now we meet, Marcia McCabe still does the class, and we meet in Autumn Glen just in the spring. But that was the focus really for me to get into writing poetry, because what Peter and Marcia would do would be to use poetry as a prompt for us to do writing, free write, writing about our lives, and then sharing that in class if we so desired. I loved it. I got some, but Risking Everything was a text that Peter Crysdale used a lot. And it's 110 poems of love and revelation, edited by Roger Housden. And he would take a poem and have us read it, a couple of people around the table, and then pick a word out of that poem, and from that word, write something. And what I discovered was that even though I was supposed to be writing memoir, what I was really doing was writing poetry now and then. And this was one of my first ones that's called Motionless, and it came from Pablo Neruda's Ode to My Suit. And my word of choice was motionless. To be still, to feel my breath move in, move out, to feel my chest rise and fall, to lie or sit in a way that encourages no movement, then to quiet the mind, to fall into a deeper stillness and leave behind all movement, all thought, all concern, all worry, to be still and know, to be. Another poem that came out of that experience of writing from the heart was called Taking Flight. And this was a trip that I took into the Art Museum in New Bedford to look at an Audubon exhibit. I saw you two together, you who never met, separated by life and death, time and space, but lovers of birds, my friend Jean and Michael, beloved brother. I went down to the Art Museum Audubon exhibit, saw Jean's name there as patron, then Michael's snowy owl on graveyard fence, the mockingbird and catbirds too. I went home to my bird books, pulled out Audubon's Birds of America, Baby Elephant folio, and there they all were, and so I learned more at the beach Sunday morning, watching the shorebirds. You see, you two started it for me, teaching me to be aware, and so it seems to me that all my life collapses into these moments, one after another. That's all of my early stuff that I'm going to bore you with, but one of the things that's really fun about poetry these days is almost anything goes. And we do a lot of free verse, and people say, oh yes, but what about the old poems, the way they would rhyme, the rhythm, you know, how you could, like Bob says, you could just really get into it, and you can memorize it because it just followed one thought after another. I have one I think you'll like. This is one of my favorite writers and poets. You probably know of him. His name is Wendell Berry. He's from Kentucky. He's a farmer and does a lot of wonderful work. And this is what he wrote, Burley Coulter's song for Kate Ellen Branch. The rugs were rolled back to the wall, the band in place, the lamps all lit. We talked and laughed a little bit, and then obeyed the caller's call. Light-footed, happy, half entranced, to balance, swing, and promenade. Do you remember how we danced and how the fiddler played? About midnight we left the crowd and wandered out to take a stroll. We heard the tree frogs and the owl. Nearby the creek was running loud. The good dark held us as we chanced the joy we two together made, remembering how we'd whirled and pranced and how the fiddler played. That night is many years ago and gone, and still I see you clear, clear as the lamplight in your hair. The old time comes around me now, and I remember how you glanced at me and how we stepped and swayed. I can't forget the way we danced, the way the fiddler played. And here's one by D.H. Lawrence. Softly, in the dusk, a woman is singing to me, taking me back down the vista of years, till I see a child sitting under the piano in the boom of the tingling strings and pressing the small, poised feet of a mother who smiles as she sings. In spite of myself, the insidious mastery of song betrays me back till the heart of me weeps to belong to the old Sunday evenings at home with winter outside and hymns in the cozy parlor, the tinkling piano our guide. So now it is vain for the singer to burst into clamor with the great black piano appassionato, The glamour of childish days is upon me. My manhood is cast down in the flood of remembrance. I weep like a child for the past. One of our favorite poets of just about everybody that takes my class is Billy Collins. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's been a poet laureate and very popular in terms of saying things in a way that's just very, very easy to understand. And I used this poem one time when I was explaining what our course was like. It's called Introduction to Poetry. I asked them to take a poem and hold it up to the light like a color slide, or press an ear against its hive. I say, drop a mouse into a poem and watch him probe his way out, or walk inside the poem's room and feel the walls for a light switch. I want them to water ski across the surface of a poem, waving at the author's name on the shore. But all they want to do is tie the poem to a chair with rope and torture a confession out of it. They begin beating it with a hose to find out what it really means. And that's what we absolutely don't do in our class. We're not concerned about analyzing poems. We're concerned about enjoying them, experiencing them, understanding someone's voice and what they're trying to tell us. Here's two more. Forgetfulness. The name of the author is the first to go, followed obediently by the title, the plot, the heartbreaking conclusion, the entire novel, which suddenly becomes one you have never read, never even heard of, as if one by one the memories you used to harbor decided to retire to the southern hemisphere of the brain, to a little fishing village where there are no phones. Long ago, you kissed the names of the 9 muses goodbye and watched the quadratic equation pack its bag. And even now, as you memorize the order of the planets, something else is slipping away. A state flower, perhaps, the address of an uncle, the capital of Paraguay. Whatever it is you are struggling to remember, it is not poised on the tip of your tongue, or even lurking in some obscure corner of your spleen. It has floated away down a dark mythological river whose name begins with an L, for as far as you can recall. Well on your own way to oblivion, where you will join those who have even forgotten how to swim and how to ride a bicycle. No wonder you rise in the middle of the night to look up the date of a famous battle in a book on war. No wonder the moon in the window seems to have drifted out of a love poem that you used to know by heart. I think I'm going to skip that one, okay. One thing we do quite a bit in our class is to take a line or listen to someone's poem and say, oh, that resonates with me. What can I do with that? You probably know this poem. It's a famous poem by William Wordsworth, 1807. And I can't recite it, but I'll read it. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. So was it when my life began, so is it now I am a man. So be it when I shall grow old, or let me die. The child is father of the man, and I could wish my days to be bound each to each in natural piety. I never liked that last line. But this is what the poet Grace Paley did with this. And she did not title this poem, she just started it out the same way he did. My heart leaps up when I behold almost any valley or village in the embrace of US 89, from White River to Lake Champlain. I am less affected by rainbows. They are handsome and fade into the damp sky just ahead of the car. The children who are glad for such beauty can now call out, look, look, a rainbow. They never say, "Oh, see the town, South Royalton, moving fast behind us, hugged by the white river itself. And what about the splendid hills of Sharon, flattening into hopeful farms? And then finally the drive downhill into our great city, Burlington. Lake Champlain rises up before your eyes, then lies down to accommodate the New York shore." I am with Wordsworth on most other high perceptions. I must admit to sharing his breathless hope for a long life. Still, it is too late. I am old already, that prayer taken care of by health and inheritance. Still, that long curling highway made me think of my leaping heart, and then of Wordsworth, who with a couple of other poets first taught my heart to leap. The music one looks back on. In early autumn, there's a concerto possible, when there's a guest in the house, and the guest is taking a shower, and the host is washing up from the night before. With each turn of the tap in the kitchen, the water temperature increases or drops upstairs, and the guest responds with little groans. Cold water for low notes, hot water for high. His hair is soapy, the tub slippery, and with his groaning he becomes the concerto's primary instrument. Then let's say the night was particularly frosty, and now the radiators are knocking, filling the house with warmth, and the children are rushing around outside in the leaves before breakfast, calling after their Irish setter, whose name is Cleveland. And still asleep, the host's wife is making those little sighs one makes before waking, as she turns and resettles and the bed creaks. Standing at the sink, the host hums to himself as he thinks of the eggs he'll soon fry up, while already there's the crackle of bacon from the stove and a smell of coffee. The mild groans of the guest, the radiator's percussion, children's high voices, the barking of a dog, even the wife's small sighs and resettlings combine into this autumn concerto, of which not one of the musicians is aware as they drift toward breakfast and then a leisurely walk through the fields near the house. Two friends who haven't seen each other in over a year. Much later, they will remember only a color, a golden yellow, and the sound of their feet scuffling the leaves. A day without rancor or angry words, the sort of day that builds a life, becoming a safe place to look back on, and geese flying south out of winter. Oh. Have you heard of William Carlos Williams? Oh, yeah, he's something. This is just to say, I have eaten the plums that were in the icebox, and which you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me, they were delicious, so sweet and so cold. Here's what he has to say about marriage. So different, this man and this woman, a stream flowing in a field. Willow poem. It is a willow when summer is over, a willow by the river from which no leaf has fallen, nor bitten by the sun turned orange or crimson. The leaves cling and grow paler, swing and grow paler over the swirling waters of the river, as if loath to let go. They are so cool, so drunk with the swirl of the wind and of the river, oblivious to winter, the last to let go and fall into the water and on the ground. And then I have a few tree poems. Trees. This was written by Jane Hirschfield and delivered on stage at the March for Science on April 22nd of last year in Washington, D.C. On the fifth day, the scientists who studied the rivers were forbidden to speak or to study the rivers. The scientists who studied the air were told not to speak of the air, and the ones who worked for the farmers were silenced, and the ones who worked for the bees. Someone from deep in the Badlands began posting facts. The facts were told not to speak and were taken away. The facts, surprised to be taken, were silent. Now it was only the rivers that spoke of the rivers, and only the wind that spoke of its bees, while the unpausing factual buds of the fruit trees continued to move toward their fruit. The silence spoke loudly of silence, and the rivers kept speaking of rivers, of boulders and air. Bound to gravity, earless and tongueless, the untested rivers kept speaking. Bus drivers, shelf stalkers, code writers, machinists, accountants, lab techs, cellists kept speaking. They spoke the fifth day of silence. And this is another by Wendell Berry. In a country once forested, the young woodland remembers the old, a dreamer dreaming of an old holy book, an old set of instructions, and the soil under the grass is dreaming of a young forest, and under the pavement the soil is dreaming of grass. This is a fun one coming up. Little Tree by E.E. Cummings. Little tree, little silent Christmas tree, you are so little, you were more like a flower. Who found you in the green forest, and were you very sorry to come away? See, I will comfort you, because you smell so sweetly. I will kiss your cool bark and hug you safe and tight, just as your mother would. Only don't be afraid. Look, the spangles that sleep all the year in a dark box, dreaming of being taken out and allowed to shine, the balls, the chains, red and gold, the fluffy threads. Put up your little arms, and I'll give them all to you to hold. Every finger shall have its ring, and there won't be a single place dark or unhappy. Then, when you're quite dressed, you'll stand in the window for everyone to see, and how they'll stare. Oh, you'll be very proud. And my little sister and I will take hands, and looking up at our beautiful tree, we'll dance and sing, Noel, Noel. Oh. When I saw that line here, dreaming of being taken out, it reminded me of something that I wrote for Wendell for one of his April birthdays. And I thought I would read it for the golfers in the crowd. It's called Spring Green. Will this winter ever end? I yearn so for spring. Not muddy, rainy, windy spring, but those glorious days of brilliant green heat and short sleeves. Here I wait till chosen, one among many. I can hardly wait to be taken out, a dark mark applied across my dimples. Can't wait to be launched by that driver bright blue skyward. For some air time till I fall, softly I hope, then to take to the air again, by an iron perhaps, before my fine friend Odyssey propels me gently, surely, across the manicured runway to the end of that long ride, the longed-for cup. Plop. Nice bird, they shout. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the threads of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to mail letters and purchase bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is I you have been looking for," and then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend. This poem was written by Naomi Shihab Nye in Colombia. She's been all over the world. Janet Alfs was the poet laureate for the town of Northampton. She's also a martial artist. She's been to the Hollyhock Writing Conference a couple of times, and I've met her. She was once in New Bedford. Her father was a minister, and she and her mother were instrumental in forming the Women's Center. This poem is called "Each Wave Falls Alone." The ocean offers secrets, ripples drawn in sand. Who could hide forever such intricate designs? A stolen heart returned, a lost heart found. Seaweed shines, an empty shell, a tumbled shard, a glance of light. Music from memory's silence, torn open on the wind-swept shore. Suffering deep, flaws bold, each wave falls alone, then without shame dances back to join the sea again. Alicia Chambers, on the question of race. They ask me to write down my race, and I think, and very seriously, and I consider writing down the truth and have my answer read. I have a strong woman colored like coffee, whispering the secrets of our past inside this body. I have a wise man, dark as chocolate, beating his drum, fighting for freedom inside this body. I have a brave woman, pale as snow, reminding that we are more than meets the eye. Her secret is safe within this body. I have a lost man, colored like me. He is weak, stumbling from place to place, trying to find his way home, warning me of everything I do not want to become. I have all this music inside this body, the rhythms guiding me, salsa, merengue, swing, songs of freedom and hope, a name that can't begin to communicate where I've been or where I plan to go inside this body. They ask me to write down my race, and I think very seriously, and I consider writing down the truth and have my answer read. I have the heart of my great-grandmother, the strength of mi abuelita, the spirit of my grandfather and my mother's understanding inside this body. I have Jack's Dr. Seuss, Lullaby and Good Night, and Marbles inside this body. I have Ray Charles, James Taylor, Bob Marley, Sly and the Family Stone, and We Five inside this body. I have a brother whose appearance does not reveal his culture. I have all our past and so much future inside this body. But I stop and simply write down other. This one's fun. The Card Players by Calvin Forbes. A fourth was needed, so one of the three invited a friend, and I came along as a spare, in case a chair was empty, since I could fill in as easily as I could shout out a rhyme. As the jive flowed like the River Jordan and Joshua and his trumpet sounded the alarm, the winning cards slammed damned on the table, and I laughed along with morning, noon, and night. My 3 big brothers, bold, smart, handsome. One slim as a stick of dynamite, the second solid as a linebacker, and the third crazy enough to fight them both if they let it roll beyond talk. Treated me like a child even after I had my first. The 3 of them, ace, king, and a wild card, improbably born within 4 years, as if Daddy and Mama were trying to break a record, or win a bet about how many diapers a woman could change in a single day without cursing the hand God had dealt her. The odds were even until I came along, years later, to tell their story. I don't know if any of you have heard of Catherine McLaughlin. She's from Paden-Aram. She's done a new book, new novel it's the first novel that's been published by Spinner Publications called Blue Collars. And she wrote, first of all, Under a Circus Moon, which is a volume of poetry. And this poem is something that kind of starts the story in the novel. It's called Leaving Home. You could hear the loss in the sound of a spoon rattling a teacup as my mother at 80 drinks in the empty kitchen. This the only expression for a silenced voice, silent with the weight of years, the heft of unsaid goodbye to the tenement of her childhood, and mine and my children's. I looked to the sentiment in boxes and plastic bags, the old chairs with worn-down arms, tables scratched with our growing pains. On a wall inside my old closet, my father's whimsical sketch of Kilroy will not be erased with spray and scrubbing. And there the wide patch of plaster of Paris, covering the hole I'd nightly pick at to reach my brother's room. Layers of paint from 1910, shades of 50s stippling, strips of 60s contact paper, all eventually yielded to a score of wallpapered years till now. And now I unplug the mantel clock. For this family in this place, time has run out. I turn the key for the last time, walk to my car past my brother, crying like the boy he once was, and we drive away slow, a procession of packed cars, my mother in the lead with me. She is coming to my house. Dry-eyed, she looks straight ahead as we leave the block where English is no longer spoken. She says only, "Goodbye, my life." I Thank You by E. E. Cummings. I thank you, God, for most this amazing day, for the leaping greenly spirits of trees and a blue, true dream of sky, and for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. I, who have died, am alive again today, and this is the sun's birthday. This is the birthday of life and of love and wings, and of the gay, great happening, illimitably earth. How should tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, breathing, any lifted from the no of all nothing, human merely being, doubt, unimaginable you? Now the ears of my ears awake, and now the eyes of my eyes are opened. I think I'll do a couple of Ted Koozers. He was also one of our Poets Laureate. I'm going to do Skater for Joan. She was all in black but for a yellow ponytail that trailed from her cap and bright blue gloves that she held out wide. The feathery fingers spread as surely she stepped, click-clack, onto the frozen top of the world. And there, with a clatter of blades, she began to braid a loose path that broadened into a meadow of curls. Across the ice she swooped and then turned back and halfway, bent her legs and leaped into the air the way a crane leaps, blue gloves lifting her lightly, and turned a snappy half-turn there in the wind before coming down, arms wide, skating backward right out of that moment, smiling back at the woman she'd been just an instant before. Then we have some mother and father poems. Those are tough, you know. I'll do a few of my personal ones. They're the kind of thing, and what makes poetry so poignant is sometimes there is just a collision of worlds that happens, and you're in a moment that you have just got to memorialize. And it can come right out of the blue, as the expression goes, and when that happens, you're kind of blown away, and you have to figure out a way to say that. So what I'm going to do is to tell you a little story about my family. My brother Michael died of cancer, as I told you. My sister-in-law Nancy also died of cancer. My brother was 54. My sister-in-law was 56. My mother was 64 when she died. And so I'll tell you a few of the names. You'll need to know a few of these names. Olinger is my dad's family name. Kathy is my sister. Michael, my brother. Nance, my sister-in-law. And what occurred in this moment was that it was her first birthday after she had passed. And I had a page-a-day calendar from Audubon, because I love to look at a bird of the day. And I tore off the sheet, and it was April 10th, and there was an indigo bunting, which is a gorgeous bird. And one time when my brother was ill, my sister and I had gone into our family farm, and I had spied this thing in a bush. And I was called the unaware one because I wasn't ever paying attention. But I saw this thing. So on April 10th, I saw this, and I needed to write a poem. And we were studying a form that's called abecedarian, which means that you take 26 lines. You start with A. The left column is A right down to Z. And you make a poem out of that, however you can. So this is what happened. This is what came out of that day, April 10th. Abecedarian Solace. April 10th, first birthday of dearly departed. Calendar reveals new bird of the day, gently jolting me back to another experience, a family trip, 3 of us going to our grandparents' homestead, where that indigo bunting in the bush juxtaposes these 2 lives gone, and Kathy, sister with me still, where love abounds and slowly heals with memories shared of Michael. Nance never knew the Olinger field, but I knew them all. Perfect photo for this day, quintessential moment of connections, road trips taken, requests honored, summer solstice in the west. Tumors of the brain and breast unite these 2 who just once met, valiant though futile their bold attempts. Whelk welcomes me back to favorite beach for solace, from X-marked spot, the date for another gone too young. And now, she sleeps at last. I've got about 3 more. Bob, is that okay? Do I have time? This was another instance of that, where I was in a situation where I saw something and I went, wow, carried me right back to an old memory, an old family memory. And to get you into what happened here, I'm going to read a poem by Lord Byron, written in 1814, called She Walks in Beauty. She walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes, thus mellowed to that tender light which heaven to gaudy day denies. One shade the more, one ray the less, had half impaired the nameless grace which waves in every raven tress, or softly lightens o'er her face, where thoughts serenely sweet express how pure, how dear their dwelling place. And on that cheek and o'er that brow, so soft, so calm, yet eloquent, the smiles that win, the tints that glow, but tell of days in goodness spent, a mind at peace with all below, a heart whose love is innocent. And my poem is called After All. On the screen I see a name, beloved family name of Mama's older brother, a private minister I barely knew who sent a young girl stamps from his collection. Mama was amazed when the answer to my letter came, but it made sense to me. I'd written him a fine letter after all. When Mama died, he sent me a poem, She Walks in Beauty, and I saw that he knew and loved her as I did. But now I'm jolted from my seat as I watch the film and see a young poet with Uncle Carlton's name, Carlton Fisher, praise his mentor in Binghamton, New York. Suddenly, an old family story, the feud over money, the inheritance that was to be shared but wasn't. And in an instant, I'm back again in that Brockton living room, while Grandma tells the story and Grandpa listens, quietly drumming his fingers on the arm of his chair. And in this moment, I wonder what story they told in New York about the rift between brothers. Mama and me. Alone I board the train in Boston, on my way to our beloved Washington State. You are there beside me, scent of English lavender, quiet presence. We gaze at each other, see ourselves in each other, settle in. Now we hear the whistle, feel the rails and familiar sway as we pick up speed. We have all time to continue the long talk that had been our lives together. This time it's Easter, your birthday, we are the same age, and you exude vitality. We take this journey together, all questions answered, blissful communion, beyond words. It's heaven, after all. And on her 98th birthday, I woke up, and this just came to me, called Morning Memories. Counting the days and years, waking to feel fresh tears, helping a friend with hers just yesterday. Listening to heart's love song, knowing it's been as long, missing you in this life as when we shared. Holding your memory near, blessing for all that's here, hearing morn's sweet bird song, I miss you so. Why does it matter? Because we gain empathy by hearing another's voice and truth. We make connections and see the truth in our own lives. And when we write, we memorialize what is important to us. These are things that can have great value when we're gone, when we're older, when people that we love want to get to know us better. If we leave something of our heart, it's a great gift. And how does it come, writing? Writing comes from silence. Listening to yourself, listening to your heart. Movement, like walking, hiking. Reading poetry, reading good poetry. Emotion, especially grief, loss, heartache, ecstasy, gratitude. a crystal clear moment in time, like those two poems I wrote to you. And the beautiful part about poetry, the reason why it's the essence of really great language, is that you're distilling the language to find the best word, the most surprising image, like the cat as fog, you know, finding the rhythm, a description that really works and grabs your attention. Before I close, I just want to tell you that it's my sincere belief that you will all support and promote libraries. Libraries are a little endangered these days. They are a lifeline for a lot of people that don't have the means that everyone has for computer use and whatever, and they're a place where everyone's welcome. And you can find some wonderful poetry readings in libraries. And you should go, because I'll tell you why. You can always find a seat, right? They give you something to eat. And you get to hear someone else's truth, someone else's reality, said in a special way. They're generally also trying to sell a book. And the amount of time that it takes to come up with a poetry collection valuable enough and worthwhile enough to publish is just gargantuan. It's a labor of love. So try and do that whenever you can. And just coincidentally, in Mattapoisett, this weekend, we have a poet coming. Her name is Josephine Yu. She was considered to be one of the best poets in 2008 by a collection that was done by Mark Strand, who is a poet laureate. And this poem was nominated when she was a student at Florida State University. Now she's got a PhD. She's going to be doing 2 events this weekend. There's a lecture Friday at 4 in the library. There's a reading Saturday at 2 in the library. They do a great job of refreshments. So come by if you can. I think it'll be well worth your while. I want to thank a few people as I close. My brother Mike Olinger, Marcia McCabe, Peter Crysdale, Ben and Deborah Baker, fellow booksellers at Baker Books, Ada Jill Schneider, Ridley Rind, Everett Hoagland, Patricia Gomes, Susan Pizzolatto, and the students in exploring poetry as readers and writers who surprise and delight me with what they write and share. Also my husband Wendell, for your listening and your sustenance. Thank you for all the good food. Thank you very much.